celebrating 24 years since the day of the original Medarot 3's release and the official introduction of an iconic model of the KBT family. It is KBT-05M Saikachis C, with a completely new kit of Missile C, Rifle C, Gatling C, biped legs, and a brand new leg ability called Momentum, which grants an all-stat buff minus armor when a shooting part is used, stacking 5 times per part. Now, much like it was with a Metabe getting a very specialized variant to celebrate the anniversary of the anime back at Medarot Day 2023, it most certainly is no exception to celebrate just a momentous occasion of the 24th anniversary of Medarot 3 and the 25th of Medarot 2, no less, on the same day. In addition to that, we'd see a very specialized version of the iconic KBT type that also was well known to anime fans worldwide. With a completely new kit, even if the model isn't quite necessarily different, much like the anime Metabe, it still packs quite a punch and, being completely honest, is remarkably reminiscent of a fully tuned up Saikachis with more or less the highlights of each of those bonuses already built in. Missile C on the head part is a shooting-based gunpowder skill, so it will be a full AoE type of attack, damaging all parts equally, or all active parts I should say, and being able to flush out silent leaders thanks to that mechanic. But compared to standard missile, this one is just a little bit stronger overall compared to the standard hit, and it also, based on explanation, also has a higher rank up bonus. So this specifically I had to ask for a little clarification on, but to explain it briefly, it really performs no different than a standard missile as far as its numbers are concerned here. But it does have a higher ascension bonus, which is the passive bonus you get on ascending the part to higher ranks than that of a standard missile. So it will hit just a little bit harder overall, but it will require you to put the effort in, of course, to raise it and ascend it to those higher ranks first. Rifle C on the right arm is a conventional shooting rifle in basically every sense of the term, no real drawback, no real weaknesses, and basically a very well-rounded attack overall. But the difference is this specialized rifle has the 30% pierce damage bonus that you would see only on tune-up bonuses that actually have rifle in their kit. So instead of having to actually upgrade into this bonus and spend countless hours and weeks grinding those tune-up points, you actually have it right away. So that means it's going to be a very powerful rifle that you can use relatively quickly right from the start. And at a base power of 1227, it is pretty high up there as far as standard conventional rifles are concerned, and that damage bonus will most certainly come in handy when the time calls for it. Gatling C on the left arm is also a conventional shooting skill that also behaves relatively no differently than that of a standard Gatling attack, which means it is a scatter type skill, damaging one part normally and then 2 others randomly at 1/3 your damage. But this one in particular has a little bit more of a kick to it. Now, the thing with Gatling attacks and why they actually are kind of popular to use, especially thanks to Silent Leader, is the fact that they typically tend to have a much higher success rate natively than most other shooting parts, which means ultimately they also have just that slightly higher chance of landing a critical hit when you're actually using the skill. Gatling C is most certainly no exception to this, and also has that passive 50% boost to the crit rate upon being used. So this means that aside from already having a relatively solid chance of landing the hit overall, even if its damage and other specs are relatively nominal compared to that of a standard Gatling attack, that extra 50% to his crit rate does mean he's much more likely to make the hit a whole lot more painful, and even with it being a scatter type skill, is going to be very painful for sure when the hit lands. And one other mention as a friendly reminder, Gatling skill or scatter skills like this are also very useful now as shield shredders, because they can eat more than one use of a shield at a time thanks to a patch about a year and a half or more ago. Legs means he's going to have relatively solid coverage across most terrains, and the leg ability of Momentum means that we now have a shooty variant that is now a counterpart to Voltage, which first debuted on Rokusho A back on the Medarot Day 23 release with that collab model of the anime variant of the Ronin type. So This already means he's going to have a relatively solid and very synergetic kit overall, similar to how it was with the standard commercial Saikachis model, but now just with a little bit more of a kick to it. When it comes to his numbers across the board, Saikachis C actually is pretty well rounded across the board too. With a leg mobility of 906, he's most certainly picking up the speed, which the commercial model did unfortunately lack. So that means he's most certainly going to be starting off on the right foot. An evade of 1122 is also nice, as it means he can hold his own fairly well with dodging or grazing. A melee resist of 854 isn't super great, but also not terrible either. Just a little caution advised if you are planning to use him in a close range environment. And a shoot resist of 1407 is also nice, as this means much like he is expected as a shooter type, he can most certainly hold his own exchanging blows from afar with that long range enemy. With an armor department, he's packing about 3,900 for the head, about 3,179, almost 3,200 for the arms, and about 4,139 for the legs. So relatively nominal in that nice all-rounded range where KBT types tend to want to sit. Not too fragile, but also not overly bulky either. So a really good hit may or may not take him out, but he's also well able to hold his own remarkably well, just like any other KBT type could. Now, one other thing to mention on Saikachis, much like the original model, he is capable of meta changing. But in contrast to the commercial model, which exchanges the kit for Missile, Crossfire, Set and Release, Wheeled Legs, and Absand, this specialized 1 in a million version of Saikachis instead will transform into the Demolition mode, or Crafty mode as it was known in the Medarot 3 when it was first released. And this is the first ever instance of this form being made playable to the player outside of the original game of Medarot 3, and its first ever appearance in a 3D setting where we can see it much more conventionally. In this form, Saikachis C exchanges his kit out entirely for a brand new skill and a completely brand new kit of Meda Sprayer, Railgun, Max Vulcan, Multi-Legs, and the leg ability of Blowbeat, which ignores a percentage of the opponent's leg resistance when attacking. Now in this kit, of course, as you see, it's going to be 1 special skill and 2 shooting skills, so definitely not going to be too far out of the range of the conventional KBT type. This particular model does have a little of an interesting caveat to it, and it's that because it is a multi-pedal type in meta change mode, it is actually not compatible with a Kabuto medal, making it the second actually, or of a few, Sagehorn being another, that is not directly compatible with a Kabuto medal 1-to-1. In this form, Drive A of Meda Sprayer is a brand new skill and is a special skill on top of that basically is now a shooting version of Emit Blade, much like we saw with Bravern with the Bang Bravern collaboration fairly recently. To explain Meda Sprayer briefly, upon consuming 30 CG on use, if you do not have this in your gauge, you cannot use the attack. You gain a ×2 damage bonus and defense ignore on top of that. So this is going to be a very exceptionally powerful shooting skill, or special skill, I should say, and might I add, this is actually going to be the first special skill implemented in the game that is actually a combat skill, whereas others in the past were only special or non-combative, such as Full Charge or Plant Up or something of the like. Again, if you do not have 30 CG in your gauge, you cannot use this skill whatsoever, but with a base power of almost 2,500, doubling that to 5k on 30 CG, it's most certainly going to be very useful if you are able to pump in that charge sustain. Railgun on Drive B is a conventional shooting skill, which is basically just the shooting version of Pile, which means it is a long-range shooting skill with no real drawback or weakness, passive pierce damage on top of that, and it also has passive defense ignore built in. So you have a very powerful skill right there, right from square one. No CG required to use it, which means you can basically use it right from turn 1 if you want something that has just a little bit more bang for your buck without going to your powerful skills that give you cooldown penalties. Max Vulcan on Drive C is another shooting skill that is a scattered AoE, so damage 1 part normally, 2 others randomly, and a 3rd damage, but this is also the scatter version of Max Shot, which means it'll have a double damage bonus as long as the user remains unscratched at 100% HP. If it does not meet this requirement, it is going to be simply just a standard Gatling attack, nothing special, nothing more, nothing less. So this does mean that he is going to be relatively reliant on not being touched if you do plan to use Max Vulcan at its capacity. Multi-legs also means he's going to be relatively solid on most terrains, next best under biped arguably, and basically with the stats he stays relatively in the same range as he did before as far as his mobility and his leg stats are concerned. His mobility will go up just a little bit, about 90 points or so at 999. He will trade a good chunk of his evade though, dropping it to 797 and pump it into his melee resist at 1038. In this more tank-based form, he can now tank blows just a little bit better than before, especially when up close and personal, but his shooting resist will naturally go up to 1644, making him just a little bit more resistant and able to hold his own a whole lot better. And Blowbeat also does mean that these skills will hit just a little bit harder than the numbers that you'll see here on the final modifier and number crunching, because it means he will be ignoring a percentage of the opponent's leg resistance when actually landing the hit. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Saikachis C a pretty synergetic and well-rounded 8 out of 10. Even though he's not packing anything absurdly broken or overly powerful, much like the anime Meta was when he released, it's still a very synergetic kit overall between Missile, Rifle, and Gatling C, and momentum pumping all stat boosts into that with the passive bonus each of those parts bring. So it's still a very well-rounded model you can use, and even being able to use Meta Sprayer, Railgun, and Max Vulcan are going to be very useful skills that you can bring to the table if you plan to make use of this specialized KBT type. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him lower at a 7 out of 10. Primarily because, of course, you are missing out on the drive mode, or crafty mode, I guess I can call it here, with Meta Sprayer, Railgun, and Max Vulcan, but you really aren't missing out on a whole lot either, if I'm being real with you. Saikachis C is a model that you can use as a pure set or as mixed parts pretty interchangeably with no real drawback, and even if you choose to use them as mixed parts, all the passive bonuses that the specialized versions of those parts get is honestly, in my opinion, just enough to justify actually using them on even your standard builds because of the extra passives and the bonuses that they bring to the table.